What defines a man? Is it the name he's given at birth, or the name he chooses when the world tries to break him? Today, we're looking at the character who started as a trend, a reflection of the 1970s cinema, but became the bedrock of the modern Marvel universe. We're talking about a man who turned a prison number into a badge of honor, and who proved that you don't need a mask to be a myth. He is the unbreakable stone that rippled the entire ocean. Let's talk about Luke Cage. Welcome back to Marvel Echoes Resonance. I'm your host, Will, and today I'm hyped to get into this character. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know we talked about super soldiers. We covered Steve Rogers way back in episode 5, and we did a deep dive on Wolverine and Weapon X in episode 7. Well, today we're connecting those dots again. We're zooming into the Weapon Plus program's most accidental success story. To really understand Luke Cage, you have to transport yourself back to 1972. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I caught the tail end of this vibe, but in 72, the culture was shifting gears. The optimism of the 60s integration movement was giving its way to a distinct assertive energy of the Black Power movement. And in Hollywood, it was the explosion of blaxploitation. You had movies like Shaft and Superfly redefining the action hero, cool, complex, and street smart. Marvel, always keeping a finger on the pulse, needed to catch that wave. But here's the thing that separates Luke Cage from being just a fad. While he was created by Archie Goodwin and designed by John Romita Sr., who gave us that iconic look, loud yellow shirt, chain belt, the real secret sauce came from the artist Billy Graham. Billy Graham was the first African-American creator on the title, and you cannot overstate his impact. He brought a level of authenticity to the way Harlem looked, and the way the characters moved, and the fashion they wore. He stopped the book from sliding into a caricature and made Luke feel like a real person living in a real neighborhood. Now, let's look at the in-universe origin, because it is a tragedy that turns into triumph. Before he was Luke, he was Carl Lucas. He wasn't a saint. He ran a gang called the Rivals, but he was trying to go straight until his best friend, Willis Stryker, framed him for heroin possession. Lucas gets sent to Seagate Prison, often titled Little Hell, and becomes inmate number 725818. This is crucial. The system took his name and gave him a number. And inside that prison, he met a sadistic guard named Billy Bob Rackham. To get parole, Lucas volunteered for an experimental procedure by Dr. Noah Bernstein. Here's where the ripples start getting a little crazy. We later find out that Bernstein's experiment wasn't just a random science. It was Weapon 6. That's right. Just like Captain America was Weapon 1 and Wolverine is Weapon X, Luke Cage is part of that same bloody lineage. When Rackham sabotaged the experiment, cranking the dials to kill Lucas, the machine exploded. But instead of dying, Lucas's cells regenerated and hardened. He walked out of there with skin harder than titanium and the strength to punch through concrete. Carl Lucas died in that vat, but Luke Cage was born. But the most revolutionary thing about Luke wasn't his skin. It was his business model. When he got back to New York, he didn't build a Batcave or some high-tech tower like Tony Stark. He needed to pay rent. He started the Heroes for Hire business. Think about how wild that was for 1972. He wasn't a billionaire playboy or a Norse god. He was a working-class guy dealing with the actual economic anxieties of his neighbors. He fought slumlords and drug dealers because those were the people hurting his community. He became the people's hero because he was accessible. If you had the cash, you had Power Man. And speaking of Power Man, he adopted that name in issue number 17. When asked why, he literally just told the villain, "Just chalk it up to the Black Power, man." He wasn't hiding. He was claiming a political identity in a world that tried to erase him. And of course, we can't talk about Cage without mentioning his partner. By the late 70s, the solo realm was struggling, so Marvel paired him with Danny Rand, the Iron Fist. It was the ultimate odd couple, like Lethal Weapon or Rush Hour, before those were even a thing. The kid from Kunlun and the Mystic Chi and the Unbreakable Street Brawler. But it worked. It bridged race, class, and fighting styles, turning them into brothers. So let's fast forward like we always do. The yellow shirt era eventually faded, and for a while in the 90s, Luke was a bit lost in the shuffle. But then came the early 2000s, and a writer named Brian Michael Bendis decided to strip everything down and rebuild Luke Cage from the soul up. This is the modern Echo that defines Luke that we know today. It started in the pages of Alias, where Luke wasn't a superhero. He was just a man looking for connection. He started a relationship with Jessica Jones, who we covered recently in episode 51, and in a genre where romance usually is just dramatic fodder, they did something real. Jessica got pregnant. Now, speaking as a father myself, this part really hits home. Usually in comics, this is where things go wrong. A retcon happens or a tragedy strikes. But Luke, he stepped up. The moment he found out about his daughter, Danielle, he evolved from a street hero to a patriarch. He realized he wasn't just fighting for the block anymore. He was fighting for the world his little girl was going to grow up in. This maturity is exactly what Captain America recruited him into the new Avengers. Cap knew the team needed to stay grounded. He knew that Iron Man had his head in the clouds, but Luke, he had his feet on the pavement. This shattered the glass ceiling. Luke Cage wasn't a B-lister anymore. He was sitting at the head of the table. But the defining moment, the scene that I think will be played in the highlight reels of comic history forever, came during Civil War. The government wanted all heroes to register. Iron Man was for it. But Luke sat in his living room unarmed, waiting for S.H.I.E.L.'s Cape Killer Squad to break down his door. He delivered this incredible monologue about history, about how the government has a track record of putting names on a list, about Jim Crow, about civil rights. He refused to sign. He refused to register his biology like some type of weapon. This moment transformed him from a superhero into a civil rights icon within the Marvel Universe. He led the resistance from the underground, keeping the Avengers alive when the world turned against them. Since then, the evolution has been nonstop. He passed the Power Man title down to a young hero named Victor Alvarez, becoming a mentor and healing old wounds from his past. He settled into a stable, loving marriage with Jessica, which, let's be honest, is a superpower in itself in the Marvel Universe. And that brings us to right now. In the post-Devil's Reign era, Luke looked at his city and saw the corruption of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who had become mayor and realized he couldn't punch his way out of a problem. So Luke Cage ran for office. And he won. Think about that journey. The man who started as inmate number 725818 is now the mayor of New York City. He's trading blows with bureaucracy instead of supervillains. In the recent gang war storyline, we see him struggling with the laws he has to uphold, even piloting a remote cage buster armor because he can't legally go out and fight on the streets. He is trying to fix the system that broke him from the very top of the tower. It is one of the most complete, satisfying arcs in all of fiction. He didn't just break out of the cage, he bought the building. So, looking at that entire trajectory, from the angry young man in Seagate to the mayor of New York, I'll leave you with this question. Do you think Luke Cage could have become the leader he is today without the trauma of prison or the cage? Was it necessary to forge the man? Is his greatest power his unbreakable skin or his unbreakable will to hold the system accountable? Jump into the comments and let me know what you really think. Thanks for listening to this episode of Marvel Echoes. It's always been a blast digging into the history with you. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Power Man, make sure you subscribe or follow so you don't miss any future episodes. Leaving a like and a 5-star review really help the podcast grow and reach more fans like you. Also, drop a comment. Who do you want us to cover next? Maybe we need to look at his best friend, Danny Rand. And for more content, including a full article and deep dive, make sure you check out the link to the website below. Until next time, true believers, make mine Marvel.